What happens when innovation proceeds at a breakneck pace, bringing us tomorrow's technology today? What happens when a company takes something amazing and makes it amazinger? What happens when our wildest dreams become reality? That's right, we get the modern miracle that is Cheetos Corn Twists. And you can eat Cheetos Corn Twists while you play with your brand spanking new ROG Ally X. So that's fun. When Asus released the ROG Ally, it was a big deal. It was a pioneer in many ways. It was one of, if not the first, true competitors to the juggernaut that is the Steam Deck. It was the first handheld to feature the Ryzen Z1 Extreme chip that offered amazing performance to battery life at the high end, and it was the first handheld made by a big PC company, and it was white, and it had RGB. And it was also one of my favorite PC handhelds that wasn't the Steam Deck. And since the launch of the original ROG Ally, there have been a few big name devices to hit the scene, but the Ally just keeps coming out on top. It's the one that I keep hearing people talk about. It's the one that I see in people's hands out in the real world. And it's the one that my mom likes to use to ride her horse around in Red Dead Redemption. Oh, Mom. But nothing lasts forever, especially in the tech world, and Asus was getting antsy that their beloved ROG Ally wasn't as good as it could be. So now they're giving us this, the ROG Ally X, an attempt to take everything that was great about the ROG Ally and give it a fresh coat of paint, some curvy ergonomics, a few changes to the controls, a bunch more RAM, and most importantly, a massive upgrade to the battery, which was probably the thing that the Ally needed most. So does all this amount to a better ROG Ally? Well, yeah, it does. Why wouldn't it? So yeah, today we're here to take a good look at the ROG Ally X. So let's do that. Looking. And now that we've had a good look, we're going to talk about it. But first, I should mention that I'm under embargo, so this isn't like a full performance test review or anything. I'm not going to give you any performance figures or benchmark data or whatever. I'll talk about all the things except the hard numbers. So if you're scared of numbers, then hey, this is the video for you. Actually, I lied. We need to talk about some numbers because we need to look at the specs. And it's here that we'll see some key differences between the original ROG Ally and the Ally X. Both use the same Z1 Extreme APU with integrated Radeon 780M graphics. One key difference in the Ally X is the RAM. The original Ally had 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5 clocked at 6400 megathings per second, but the Ally X has increased that up to 24 gigabytes. And now we're running at 7,500 megathings per second. The original Ally had a 512 gigabyte internal 2230 NVMe SSD. However, the Ally X has a 1 terabyte 2280 SSD. That's the bigger style of SSD, which are generally cheaper and easier to get a hold of. And we get the same 7-inch 1080p 120Hz screen with FreeSync Premium. The biggest change, the one that I'm most excited about, is the battery. They've doubled the battery size. So the original Ally had a 40 watt-hour battery. The Ally X has a 80 watt-hour battery. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. So this isn't the ROG Ally 2. The processor and the GPU are still the same, so we should expect very similar performance, but we get some very nice kind of tangential upgrades that actually change the experience of gaming on this thing quite a bit. Looking around the device, we can see quite a few more changes. We now have 2 USB-C holes, so you can do charging and plug in a device at the same time without a hub or a dock. Also, one of those USB-C holes is USB 4. The original Ally had Asus's proprietary XG Mobile interface for connecting external GPUs. The Ally X isn't compatible with those. However, now it's compatible with USB 4 external GPU solutions, including Thunderbolt GPUs. It kind of the best of both worlds that way. You know, you got desktop performance at home and the ability to have handheld performance when you're ootin' a boot. Also, the microSD card slot has been moved. I'm pretty sure that the SD card issues that the original Ally had aren't going to be an issue here with the new motherboard design. One major difference to the appearance of the device is that they went with black instead of white. This is actually a downgrade, in my opinion. Plain black devices are boring to me, and the white shell on the original Ally looked great. It was like a handheld made of marshmallow. I really wish they went with a white shell on the Ally X, and since this is my video and I'm the god of this world, I say that white would have been a better choice. The hand feel is very similar to the base Ally. I've seen lots of videos of people who got this early talking about how different everything is, so I was surprised that it felt barely different at all. The controls are more or less in the same spot, the shape is more or less the same. The Ally X has some slightly less angular angles, a bit more girth in the booty, which are a little bit more ergonomic and comfortable, but it's a very small difference in the big picture. I always liked the hand feel of the original Ally, and I like the Ally X too. Now, obviously, since they increased the battery size, that will lead to an increased weight. But again, here, I was surprised at how similar it felt to the original Ally. The Ally X is 683 grams, and the original Ally is 612 grams. So it's a tad heavier, but not much. They've tweaked every component in the Ally to make the entire thing lighter. So they've doubled the battery, but only ended up adding about 70 grams to the weight, which is seriously impressive. And the weight is distributed such that it doesn't feel heavier in your hands. It kind of just balances itself out. So that alone is a pretty impressive feat. I couldn't have done it better myself. When I did my review of the original Ally, I didn't love the controls, but after using this for a few months, they grew on me. I like the size and the shape of the buttons. I like the feel of the sticks. Overall, it's become my second favorite handheld controls after the Steam Deck. And the Ally X feels very similar in most ways, but it's a bit different in a few ways. The sticks are tighter, more springy. And the caps on the sticks have a different shape to them. For what it's worth, I prefer the sticks on the original Ally, including the original caps, but these new ones are good too, so I can't complain much. And while you're using the controls in desktop mode, you can control your cursor with the sticks. So you won't need to smudge up your screen tapping it with your finger when you, for example, click the subscribe button. Yeah, you just use your stick for that. The back paddle buttons are smaller and have a different shape, but when this thing is actually in your hand, it ends up feeling pretty darn close to the original. I don't like back paddle buttons personally, and I don't like these either, but that's more of a sensory thing with me. I don't like the feel of buttons under my fingers around the back. It kind of weirds me out. The triggers are a bit different. On the original Ally, they had these kind of narrow wedge-shaped triggers, but these new triggers are much more flared and larger and flatter. They feel like a more spacious and comfortable place to rest your fingies. There's more that I could say. The D-pad is a slightly different shape. The haptic feedback is a bit better. The bumpers have a different click feel, but come on, it's barely any different in the big picture. When it comes to the system, it's Windows, and Windows generally sucks pretty hard on handhelds. But on the Asus side of things, the quick settings and the Armory crate, these have improved a lot in the year or so since the Ally launched. And it's the exact same software experience on the Ally X, so it's pretty good. One thing that I do want to mention that Asus deserves credit for is that they have done a swell job of making it so that Windows Modern Standby doesn't suck on the Ally and the Ally X. Basically, if it's in a sleep mode for long enough, the device will automatically hibernate, and it works well. I wish that all my Windows handhelds had this feature. The screen on the Ally X is the same screen. It's not different at all from the original Ally. So it's 7 inches, which is a great size considering the size of the device. It's 120 Hz, and you won't be running most games at 120 Hz. Anything graphically demanding, you'll be lucky to reach 60 Hz, but some easier to run games can run at 120 Hz, and they are glorious when they do. And if you're into retro gaming, you can make use of black frame insertion on a display like this. I don't personally use BFI, I can barely see a difference, but for some reason people always bring it up when I talk about 120 Hz screens, so there you go, I mentioned it. But most importantly, this device has FreeSync Premium, which means that the display can automatically adjust its refresh rate on the fly, and it kind of makes your game feel like it's running at a higher frame rate than it is. I'm a big fan of gaming on the Ally in general for this effect alone, and it's just as good on the Ally X. And while I would have loved if we got an upgrade to OLED or if we had HDR on the Ally, it's still just a good overall screen. 1080p at 7 inches is a ton of pixels, so the images are crisp and clear, great color, great viewing angles, good for watching TechDweeb, so Do lots of that if you get one of these. And they've apparently made some small changes to the speakers. They say they're quote unquote louder and punchier. Now, I don't think that they're louder. They sound like the same volume, and I'm measuring the same volume. But they do sound a little bit clearer, I guess, maybe less muffled. Hard to put my finger on. Oh, wait, no, it's easy to put my finger on. But the original Ally had amazing sound, and it's a little better here, so that's neat. Like I said at the start, I can't give you exact performance figures and benchmarks. I have that data. I've been recording gameplay and stuff, and I'll probably do a video where I go deep on the performance difference. So let me know if you'd like to see that video in the comments below. But I think I'm allowed to vaguely say that the Ally X does have improved performance. It's not a huge amount of performance. Some games benefit more than others, but it's definitely a thing. I suspect that the reason for this is the increased RAM speed. Since the Ally uses system RAM as VRAM, having 7500 megahertz RAM obviously will work out better than the older 6400 megahertz of the original Ally. I mean, realistically, don't buy the Ally X if you just want a performance bump. It's a little boost, which is nice, but it's not game-changing. What is game-changing is the battery life. Again, speaking vaguely, the Ally X's battery is such a big improvement that it literally changes the way that I use the Ally X. Because now I can game on it and get so much battery life that my battery anxiety basically goes away. I know that if I'm mindful of the TDP that I'm using, this can become an all-day device. Or if I want to crank up the performance, I'll be able to get multiple play sessions without feeling like I need to be near an outlet to enjoy myself. And if you're playing low-spec games like indie games or retro games, then you can game for days on this thing. And real quick, I'll mention that they've done some solid things with a cooling solution. To my ears, when running at the silent profile, this thing is basically inaudible. At performance, you can hear it, but it's very quiet. And at turbo mode, the fans do kick on and you can hear them, but they are quieter than most devices, including the original Ally. And the actual sound of the fans is much more pleasant. It's less of a whine and more of like a deeper kind of rumble noise. Even though I can't show you the performance data, I'm still going to give you my final thoughts on this thing because the performance data doesn't really factor into whether or not you should buy the Ally X. It's a little boost, but it's not enough to justify anyone to go out and buy this thing for that. I think there will be two types of people interested in the Ally X. The first is those who don't have an Ally but are interested in one. And maybe they were debating spending their tax refund on one. And they heard that the Ally X is coming along, so they held off pulling the trigger, and they're wondering if now is the time to get in on the ROG Ally thing. And for those people, yeah, definitely. The Ally X is the superior product. If you're looking at a higher end Windows handheld and are looking to spend $800, the Ally X is worth the price jump over the base model, in my opinion. And it's probably my top choice in this price range because it's great in so many ways. And the second type of person interested in this thing are going to be people who have an Ally, who like their Ally, and are wondering if they should upgrade. And yes, I do think it's worth considering upgrading. Not because of the small performance bump, or the bigger SSD, or the small improvements to nearly every aspect of this thing, but mainly because now we have a massive battery that literally changes the game. It changes the way that you play games. Every game you can run at increased TDP and get more battery life than the base Ally. If you have an Ally and you love it, but you want the Ally X because of the battery thing, then now is a great time to flip the old Ally, sell it off, and to pay for the upgrade. Which brings me to my final point. The original Ally is still great, and there are a ton of these things hitting the used market. So if you don't have one yet, if you're interested in the Ally but you don't want to shell out the big bucks, now is the time to buy a used Ally. I mean, as long as you keep your expectations in check, understand that the battery on these used Allies won't be as good as when they were new. Keep in mind the micro SD card issue and make sure you find out if the device that you're getting has had that replaced or if they've ever had problems. But the OG Ally is such a good device that if you can find one at a crazy deal, yeah, go for it. The actual games that you'll play and the performance that you'll get is going to be so similar to the new shiny Ally X that you're not going to be missing out on much. And finally, I need to address the elephant in the room. Isn't she lovely? Her name is Ramona. See what I did there? So maybe you've heard, maybe you haven't, but Asus has been in some hot water a few times regarding the warranty stuff. They had SD card reader problems on the Ally, which they did end up covering with an extended warranty, but the black stain right now is that whole Gamers Nexus expose thing, where they uncovered some pretty weird stuff with Asus's RMA service. Asus has responded appropriately, in my opinion. For what it's worth, I've had no problems with any of my Asus stuff, but time will tell if the ROG Ally X has a clear conscience. But elephants are big, stinky creatures. Kinda hard to ignore them when they're in the room, you know? Sorry, Ramona. And that's it. That's all my most important thoughts on the Ally X so far. I have some performance data that I've been collecting and gameplay benchmarks and stuff, so I'll probably do another video going deep on the performance difference. So get subscribed if you haven't yet so you don't miss that. Let me know what you think of the Ally X or anything else that you want to tell me about your life in the comments below, right after you click the like button, of course. But that's it from me for today. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.